Hey, this is Aaron from AaronWitten.com, here to discuss hamstring training. The hamstrings are one of the most undervalued muscle groups in the entire body, and they receive far less attention than they should. The hamstrings are actually very large and very powerful, and they contribute to most movements involving the lower body and the lower back. So if you want a strong, healthy lower back, you should really emphasize your hamstrings in terms of strength and flexibility. Most lower back injuries, by the way, are a result of tight hamstrings. They act like a suspension system, cables, if you will, that connect up through the glutes into the spinal erectors. When they're too tight, it simply puts a lot of stress on the system. So get loose and get strong. We can discuss flexibility in another video. Today we're going to discuss how to get strong in the hamstring area. The hamstrings are actually very complex. They're composed of multiple muscle groups, so it's important that you hit them from several angles. It's also important that you realize that they are strongly engaged in all of your thigh training. You cannot isolate just the quads by squatting or lunging or what have you. The hamstrings are designed to work in an antagonistic fashion to the quads, so therefore if you're using these, you're absolutely using these at the same time. It's critical that these be strong enough to counteract the force that's imposed upon the knees by the quadriceps. That's a cause of a lot of knee injuries, is an imbalance or a poorly proportioned ratio between the quadriceps and the hamstrings. You really want them as close as possible to 1-to-1, or at least 75% the strength of the quads. I really prefer a 100% ratio, and that will give you bulletproof knees. So when you're squatting, when you're working the lower body, you are working the hamstrings, guaranteed. You need to take that into account when you're doing exercise programming. Whenever I see a routine that splits thigh training into quads and separate hamstring days, I know it's a mistake because you simply can't do that. There's no way to work the quads without involving the hamstrings. And so what you get is an overtrained state where the hamstrings never really get any rest, and that leads to injury over time. So you got to respect the fact that they are used in many different fashions. Now, when it comes to direct training of the hamstrings, there are three movements that I really like to employ. Those are the stiff-legged deadlift, the glute ham raise, and lastly, the wind sprint. And that may be one that you're not accustomed to hearing from a lot of trainers. We'll discuss that briefly first. I will not be demonstrating the wind sprint within the confines of my gym. But you need to find a preferably grassy area, or if you have access to a track. Short distances, like 20 to 40 yards are best. The hamstrings are a very explosive white fiber muscle group, and so they are engaged maximally when placed under that kind of explosive stress, such as a sprint. And when I say sprint, I do mean sprint. When I'm talking about jogging around the block, you need to get down, dig in, and pop up and out of the hole and blow as hard as you can, as far as you can. And if you can go more than about 50 yards, you're probably not going as hard as you can. So you do this short distance and then walk back and repeat. 5 or 6 cycles like that's usually sufficient. Wind sprints are excellent, but also because of the strong stress imposed, the injury potential is a little bit higher. So if you're a heavier individual, or if the hamstrings simply aren't up to par, if you've got that kind of imbalance between the quads and hams, you might want to hold off on those. The stiff-legged deadlift is the first movement we're going to look at, and this is pretty tough to beat. This is a rare instance here where you have a motion that emphasizes contraction and stretch pretty much at the same levels. The stiff-legged deadlift uses the hamstrings as they are intended in conjunction with the calves, the glutes, and the lower back. This really emphasizes and exemplifies the posterior chain as a whole. Posterior chain is those muscle groups, and those are the most powerful in the entire body. These are the muscles that the human body is designed to use for maximum power output. Most of the muscles along the front of the body are not. They're used for routine grasping, holding, carrying, these kind of things. But the muscle groups along the back of the body are where all the power lies. So the stiff-legged deadlift is actually a very strong motion when done properly. This is not a lightweight movement. You see a lot of guys doing it in funky ways and using it in odd fashions. It should actually be utilized as a power motion, and that means you should move some weight. You should be able to use around 80% of what you squat for the same number of reps. Again, we want to develop that balance between the quads and the hams. So the stiff-legged deadlift should be done with the feet close together and a flat back with a stretch adequate to the hamstrings and to the individual. If you're really tight in the hams, don't force it. Get loose before you use that resistance to lower you even further. I'm going to use our model, Mr. Jeff Evie, to demonstrate this motion. This is the stiff-legged deadlift. I'm going to take a comfortable grip on it, keep his feet close together. Okay, we're seeing a couple of things here, and they're all good. Number one, his knees are not locked. That's great. You want to maintain a slight bend. Notice how he's not squatting into the motion. That slight bend in the knee there is going to relieve a lot of stress off the lower back. It's going to translate that stress into the target muscles rather than the joints. Secondly, we have a great flat back here. It's a beautiful thing. That's going to protect his spine. Third, he's lowering the bar by sticking his butt out. He's coming up by moving the hips forward. And that's what we're after. One more rep for me. He's keeping the bar close to his body. These are all key points. Thank you, Jeff. The stiff-legged deadlift, when done properly in that fashion, is very safe. A lot of people are scared to work anything that involves the lower back directly, such as that. They should not be. The lower back is a muscle group just like any other, and it can be worked just like any other. It's going to burn, it's going to ache, it'll even get sore. These are not bad things. We're just programmed to live in fear of the lower back. You need not be that way if you lift in good form. The lower back, in conjunction with the hamstrings and glutes, is a tremendously powerful muscle complex. So learn to use it. Now, the final motion I'm going to look at here is the glute ham raise. This is a movement that is not seen in a lot of gyms. It should be. I recommend that you try to get access to one if you can. This is a motion that incorporates isolation along with some compound aspects, which is kind of rare. Check it out. What you do is start with the legs straight and then use the hamstrings to flex the knee and come upright. Just like that. You can hold some weight against the chest for additional resistance. That is the glute ham raise. Excellent motion. And that will conclude our video on hamstring training. Thank you very much.